Well, g'day, sand trackers and barefooters. Hope you're doing well. It's that time of the week again, Tuesday morning live Facebook feed. So we'll just be hanging out for the next 15 to 20 minutes. If you're coming in to watch this later, welcome. Feel free to leave some comments and any questions you might have from the club. Linda, just confirm that you can hear me, but looking forward to this discussion. So today we're actually talking about bootstrapping. Good to see. Thanks, Linda. Hope you're doing well, mate, over there in France. Is it nice and warm and sunny, or you got rain and cold again? But so we're going to talk about bootstrapping. All right. So what does bootstrapping even mean? Well, it comes from it. Well, they think it comes from a term. It's like, you've heard the. Sorry, the reason I'm late was I actually had a bit of a coughing fit earlier. It comes from the term, to pull someone up by their bootstraps, right? It's one of those things. If you were to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, good to see. And it's one of the things that's it's very difficult to do, right? If you reach down now and try and pull yourself up by your shoelaces or your bootstraps, as they call them, try it. Good luck. You might have to jump up in the air at the same time. But so bootstrapping comes from this idea that it is a difficult journey. It's a very real journey, but it implies simplicity. Okay, and so the term to pull yourself up by your bootstraps is a term that really implies that I'm doing it my way. I'm doing it myself. I'm doing it in whatever strength I've got, and I've got certain internal abilities to do that. So it's a term we've heard a lot in the startup world. All right, we've heard about bootstrapping. We've heard about this term. And in fact, if you go back through the Business in Bare Feet video archives, you'll find, I think just last week, we just posted an older video that Mark and I did back in Australia some time ago called Bootstrapping. It was part of our foundation series, and we talked through some of the ins and outs of that. So today it's just kind of building on that, adding new content. And if you're watching this, I would love you to tell me what you're doing. And it's really interesting because I see this bootstrapping mentality play out, and I work with small and large companies, but I see it play out in larger business as well. And it starts to take on terminology like agile or lean or something like that. And so it really is a business mentality, not just a personal mentality. It's all about how do you do things simply, how do you do things as internally as possible with the resources you've got to be able to grow naturally, to be able to develop your business. Okay, so if you've been around the startup business world for more than a month, no doubt you've heard this terminology. All right, there's going to be no secrets here, and so it's really about starting a business with minimal or zero investment in terms of outside of yourself. A couple of really common bootstrapping strategies. I'll talk through some in a minute, but I see a lot of businesses, they'll use either personal assets or they'll, one of my favorite terminologies with my clients is, let's find a client to fund the journey. And so there's an implication there in terms of how you go to market. So what of it? Well, it's a tough journey. There's no doubt about it. I know Mark and Linda and myself and a bunch of our mentors, they've all done it. In fact, we're going to have two entrepreneurs over the next 2 weeks. We've got John Jones from Antherware speaking. I'll be doing a campfire chat with him this week, and we'll be doing that live on Facebook. And then next week we're going to have Sebastian as well, which will be which I'll put some details up. We'll put some details up in the messages later, so you can find both of those people, get a bit of their story before they come on board. So really great opportunities to see, and some of these guys are still doing it, right? So it's not just they've made squillions and now they're looking back. They're still thinking that way. They're still thinking, okay, how do I do this simply? How do I keep control of this? I remember meeting a guy in a city I lived in Australia who invented some technology around static radar, and even when I met him, he still had not sold. Even as this was years ago now, he had not sold a chunk of his business to anyone else, and he was sort of heading towards $400-500 million from a startup, and so he was able to find some client contracts. Obviously, they were government that were able to fund his journey. So this is possible for anybody, all right. And one of the things I love about our community too is we do also talk to a lot of digital nomads. We talk to a lot of people who are providing services on the road, whatever it might be. And so they're traveling. So a laptop, a phone, and an internet connection. That's all you need. And so that's a great way to bootstrap. And 3 of my businesses have been started with those 3 things. The first one was a 56K internet connection, so that was a bit harder. That was a real bootstrap. So the bottom line is the bootstrapping, it can be a longer journey. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges first and then get into, well, why would you do it? Okay, it can be a longer journey. There can be some challenges in terms of your credibility. If people don't know who you are, if they don't know where you're coming from, if you're an unheard of, and you haven't got someone backing you that is a heard of, then obviously that can create some challenges in terms of your own sense and credibility. Now, one of the things I see, I call it the entrepreneur's dilemma, and that is a lot of us entrepreneurs are distracted by shiny stuff, right? So I come across a lot of businesses. Some of them have been in startup mode for years, and which really means that, they're not thriving, okay? And so businesses that are in that kind of startup mode space constantly, and it's usually because the entrepreneur, whether they've got a bunch of people or not, I've seen this with people with staff of 5, 6, 7, and also obviously guys on their own, people on their own. There's this kind of, this attraction towards shiny stuff, right? So, because usually the entrepreneur has come up with something, they've come up with a new way of doing it, and the lack of focus is then delivering a great business around that idea. They'll do it for a while, then something will come along, or there'll be a distraction in the strategy. There'll be a, we all of a sudden got this demand from a foreign country, so let's go after that. In fact, I had a client do that, and so funnily enough, it came to nothing. And so there's all these distractions, and so they don't focus on the stuff that really matters. They don't focus on, let's just get this one thing working really well, and then maybe out of that we can create an innovation department down the track where I can just sit and innovate with a successful business behind me. So a lot of these people don't really bring the right people around them very early, and so it can create some problems in terms of them understanding the journey and where they're going with that. Look, this is an interesting one. A cashed up competitor can get a jump on you. At the end of the day, we all know the golden rule, who has the gold makes the rules. And whether we like it or not, that's kind of the way it is. And particularly the culture that I live in here, it's less about what can we make up and more about how can we sue someone else so I can get a jump on my competitor. If you've done business in America, you may have experienced some of that. Some of it's legit, some of it's just lazy competition, some of it's just because they got money. And so these are things when you are bootstrapping, if you've got something that maybe isn't or is easy to replicate, is perhaps so you've got to be careful along that journey. So sometimes choosing to just get an investor to pump into it and really ramp it up quickly and be first to market is a better strategy. So it's just understanding that could be the case. The last, this other one here, it ties back into the I call the entrepreneur's dilemma, and that is that that limited cash flow means that you've got limited space to create. Okay, and so you haven't got the time just to sit and create stuff all the time. Some stage you got to turn one of those things. I say, brainstorm everything, pick something. That's I've actually done a commitment series, and that's one of the themes in the commitment story. Brainstorm everything, pick something, get after that thing. Now, obviously, there's a bunch of journeys. We've talked about marketing, we've talked about business strategy, we've talked about all these different things, and so understanding that you need to do that. You need to pick something that you and so there's going to be a season where it's going to feel like, particularly to those really creative entrepreneurs, that I can't be as creative as I want to be, and so that's a real challenge. I think when you're bootstrapping too, and particularly when we start talking to entrepreneurs who are more engineering minded, they're more maybe creative minded, so they'll tend to be perhaps a little bit introverted. They tend to be a bit mistrusting of the market and want to keep things to themselves. This is where we might find that whole introvertedness means that they switch off to community as well. Now, all human beings need community, and especially when you're starting out in business and when you're building a business, having that community around you. We've got people like Nino on here now. Is with a co-working or student co-working facility over in Georgia, the country. And so, I work with a co-working facility up here. In fact, we'll have John from Hatch up here in Asheville, North Carolina. And so these spaces allow you to get around. They allow them to bring in resources like legal, like marketing, like mentoring and all those sorts of things. And that's exactly why we have Sandtrax, because that allows people like you to have access to global mentors online anytime you want. And so, that's part of the journey. So it's really bringing those people into that space. And so often when they're bootstrapping, they're kind of trying to do their own thing and they miss that opportunity. So if that's the deal, well then why would you bootstrap? Why would you do that? Yeah, you're probably asking yourself the same question right now. Well, I think there's one really cool reason, and it's okay. And that is there's a personal satisfaction to doing it. You think about all those stories you've heard. To think about that satisfaction of looking back on something. I'll use an example here, but I've built businesses where I've looked back and thought they were good businesses. We had good people. We did some cool stuff together. We had some great clients. We got to create some things together. We got to build into people's lives and support people through certain journeys or whatever it was. And we got to build a product. For example, when I was in the branding space, I used to love it. The common comment from our client was, "Hey, you guys are designers without the bullcrap, without the pretension," and that's what they just loved to come in and have a conversation, talk about where they were going, and that helped us be more creative in what we did. So there's this satisfaction of building something that's yours, that's your way. You haven't got an investor telling you how you got to do it and breathing down your neck all the time. Okay, so that's one great reason. It does make for, flowing on from that, it does make for a really cool story, right? I mean, how many of these, we look at some of the big businesses, but how many, how many businesses have started in grandma's garage, right? And so it seems to be the Silicon Valley story. It's like there must have been just a whole swathe of empty grandma garages in San Jose and that part of the world sometime back in the 60s and 70s, and everybody decided that would be cool. but it still happens today. I still see people building offices in their garages or setting up facilities at home or maybe taking out some very basic space or joining a co-working space. And so but at the end of the day, it's not about that. It's about it creates a great story, right? And people love, we actually talked about story a couple of weeks ago in one of these videos. People love rallying around a really good story. In fact, we go back to May King's interview as well, where she talks about FOMO, but it was really about story marketing and how we tell a great story. And maybe we provide a link, Linda, back to that as well. And so it does make for a good story. And everyone loves a good story. At the end of the day, there's the beautiful Frank Sinatra song, "I Did It My Way." I won't sing, I promise. But at the end of the day, there is that satisfaction. I did it my way. It ties into your business your way, but I did it my way. I did it in a way that could make a difference. I did something that, there weren't people saying to me, "No, you can't do that because I'm giving you money," or "No, I'm controlling this." And so there was an ability for you to explore stuff, to maybe challenge some assumptions, maybe even disrupt the market. And so, so doing it your way is really, really important, because your business will always reflect you, your passions, your uniqueness, as long as you own that business and as long as you're in control. Okay, and so that's really cool to be able to naturally just flow into something that is a reflection of you. Now, we could talk about some challenges around that at some other time, but that's a really cool piece. I think the big thing, just tactically, in terms of why would you bootstrap, is that you keep control of your business. Okay, all of this has been alluding to doing it my way, having a great story, owning it. So I keep control of my business in the early days, and we've seen so many where they maybe have been very early, maybe MVP, maybe just getting clients on board, whatever it might be, and investors have come around. And of course, when your business isn't worth a lot because it's not doing a lot, an investor will demand more of the business because the risk is higher. And so there is that sort of sense of, if you can bootstrap and you can start building clients and you can start developing the business out there, that when you do, it doesn't mean you're not going to go and get investors at some stage, but that investor, for the same amount of money, is going to demand less of your business because the risk is lower. There's more chance of success because you've already made some of it work, and really you're going to that next stage where the investor may be 10xing, 100xing your market. They may be bringing, the things we talked about, the connections, the credibilities, the resources, the financial partnership, whatever it might be. And so if you bootstrap at the start and do what I call, which is client fund your business, that can really help, and it helps you keep early control. Okay. Now, one of the other challenges, and I've seen this a lot, particularly in investment pitches, where there'll be too many owners. So they might have gone out to friends, family, fools. They might have gone out to a bunch of investors already who have kicked in 5-10 grand each and are demanding 10-20% of the business. And they've got all these owners, and I don't know if you may have even seen it yourself. Certainly seen it a little bit on some of the public stuff like Shark Tank. Not that we like to talk too much about that, but it's kind of fun to watch. Where if there's more than another investor involved or more than just the people pitching, they kind of shy away because their ownership gets diluted. There's a history of just going after the next dollar, all those sorts of things. So if you've got too many owners, that can be a challenge. And so bootstrapping obviously allows you to consolidate your ownership, maybe keep it just to yourself. It may be just a loan that you've got or something like that basically keeps the ownership in your hand, which means when you go to your A's and B's and when you start looking at serious investment, you're worth a whole lot more to that person because, they're going to be able to, that they're not going to have their shares diluted and so forth. Okay. So there's no doubt that a proven concept, and it's the last reason why you would bootstrap, at the end of the day, a proven concept is way more valuable. Okay. And as I said before, that means that, your investment rounds are going to be higher for less percentage. You're going to be looking at big dollars to 10x. You've actually thought about your business processes. That doesn't mean you've arrived, but you've thought through it, and you're moving forward. So just a couple of things then to talk about, well, how do we go about bootstrapping? All right. So I've got a couple of ideas here. I'm just going to read through some of them for you. And I'd love your comments. And so this is where, as you're watching this, I want you to tell us, what are some of the things you're doing to bootstrap your business? What are some of the things you're doing to drive down your costs, to keep control of your business, to not go into maybe horrible debt or not have someone come and take control? Okay, what are the things you're doing right now that could help our people and help people watching this video really get a hold of that? So a couple of things here. I think it's easier if you know the business space that you're in, okay? Especially if you love it and you're energized by it, okay? It's way easier to bootstrap something. It's way easier to put up with having to live in your parents' basement or, having to share a house with someone. Maybe you're going to go to quirky co-living over in the San Diego area with our mate Dave. So it's way easier to join those communities if you're in a space that you love, if you're driven by I work with all business of all kinds, and a business that has no purpose has no existence, and that flows from you, the owner, the entrepreneur. And so if you're in a space that you're energized by, it makes it way easier when things are tough in the beginning, because they will be tough. You're kind of wondering, am I going to make it? Am I going to get past the early adopters and into the main street? And say, Craig Catlow, all the way from Nelson Bay, man, great to see you. And so you can't have it all. So the second thing is you can't have it all today. All right. If you're bootstrapping, you just can't. In fact, even if you're going for investment, you can't have it all today. But you can't have it all today. All right. You're not going to be a multi-billionaire overnight. You may never be a multi-billionaire. But you need to know what you're trying to get after. And so this is where, we do things like we take our guys through quarterly execution planning and looking at objectives and key results and those sorts of things. And you need to know where you're headed, so you're heading in the right direction, because we all need that hope, that confident expectation. But at the same time, you just need to know that you can't have it all today. All right. But it's all about working forward. So are you in a better position tomorrow? Are you further forward tomorrow? It may not feel like a better position than you are today. Can the team you need, here's another thing, can the team that you need be equity partners? We see this a lot, particularly in startup weekends or hackathons and demo days and stuff like that, where a lot of them are not so much that they really want an investment, they're actually looking maybe for a co-founder, or they're looking for partners. And so bringing co-founders in, now this happens at all levels of business. They'll bring in people that they need to run the business well. I always talk about Richard Branson, and we think about him as the multi-squillionaire. And thanks, Marcus, appreciate it, mate. And yeah, so I think about a guy like him who's, he's way out of reach, but when he starts a business, or when he invests into a business, he makes sure there's people around that aren't him, and so that are more financially minded, that are very pragmatic, and that sort of thing. And so, but that's the same for us, and I always do the same too. Whenever I go into business anywhere, I'm always looking for the people who are. I'm similar in the sense that I want them to be more pragmatic. I want them to think through the detail better than me and to challenge me in the detail. And that's definitely Linda in our community, right, Linda? Even though she's a beautiful people person, but she is very good at pulling us all into line. And so equity partners become really important here. So co-founders, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so look at that. Okay, so look at rather than am I paying a salary for the next person, is can they be a partner? Can I sacrifice salary for ownership and those sorts of things? So that way you bring your resources around, particularly if it's software and that sort of thing. Obviously a bit harder in manufacturing. Look for opportunities to minimize capital and other costs. Look, this is just part of the journey, and you know what? In business, you'll never stop doing that. All right, we're always looking at how do we get our SAG costs, how do we get our capital expenses, how do we our capex, that sort of thing. How do we get these things into a place? We've got to keep a constant eye on them. G'day, Andrew Matthews, mate. Bulgaria, I think. So really cool to see you here, man. Really cool. And yes, Linda, smiley faces. There you go. That's our Linda. And so looking for opportunities to minimize capital. All right. So this is part of the bootstrapping journey. How can you save money? How can you tighten things down? Are there things you could do differently? I saw some conversations come through the channels this week about costs, input costs into one of the business, and they were really high. They're out of a Western country, so they're using Western labor, and that's all good and noble. But sometimes, that's very expensive. And so there could be some offshoring in terms of your personal assistant, in terms of maybe some of your web or design or development work. And don't just see it as shipping offshore and losing a job here. There are tons of jobs. Well, there was. In fact, there still are quite a few jobs in the West. But I love it. I've got a mate in a company that does real estate photography here in the US called Next Door Photos. Great model. And one of the things they do is they actually ship the photography that's taken off to, I believe, Kenya and somewhere else. And they're using that as an opportunity to rescue particularly women, but people from the trafficking industry and that sort of thing. So there's some really cool things you can do if you start to think laterally rather than just, I'm just shipping my job offshore because it's $10 an hour as opposed to $25 or $30 an hour. Okay, so there's some cool bootstrapping stuff you do, and we're a very connected world. So that does. So look at ways that you can reduce your costs. Rent. Where do you need to even pay rent? Do you need to have an office? Can you work from home? Can you, whatever it might be, can you sit out in a coffee shop? You may not need anything. And so maybe you could be in a B&B in France or on a balcony in Western North Carolina. Who knows? So, and by the way, I am actually bootstrapping a business right now. So I'm kind of speaking a little bit from experience here. So find suppliers and distributors that may become part of your journey. All right. So I've heard this story a few times. I remember meeting a magazine developer back on the Sunshine Coast, actually, Linda, and was talking to them, and they were doing a magazine. The cost of printing was horrendous, and they found a printer who said, you know what, I actually believe in what you're doing here, so I'm actually going to, I'm going to print it, and then you pay me as the magazine sells. And she did, and the magazine multiplied and grew. And even today, even to the point where I don't think that magazine exists anymore. This is back when magazines were cool. And so even to the point where I last saw her, she said, there's no way are they the cheapest option. But he was loyal to me at the beginning. And so I stand by them now, and it's worth it. And so there is that kind of good going on there as well. And so look for those people who want to be part of your story. Maybe a supplier creates a vertical supply chain for you in terms of, in terms of, you know, being able to invest into your business. Maybe you give them some equity, maybe they become part of what you're doing and they give you access to distribution channels and all sorts of things. So have a think about that in terms of your bootstrapping. Remember, cash flow is critical. This is the case for every single business. I've been working with multi-billion-dollar companies over here, and they struggle with cash flow. So, sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but cash flow will always be a challenge. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how profitable. I ran a Debbie Corlett. My goodness, how are you doing? All the way from Western Sydney, and so. So when we look at that whole process, so we remember that cash flow is critical. Okay, I had a very profitable business that we had to close. Had no cash. Okay, we couldn't pay staff, you know. So and then there's a whole bunch of insolvency trading laws and so forth. Now, obviously, knowing what I know now, I didn't have to, but this was a while ago and I didn't know as much, and so we all learned. Great to see you, mate. So glad you could be here. And so remember, cash flow is absolutely critical. You got to have cash. So you need access. So that means maybe creating a buffer. I remember working with a property investor, and he'd always say, what do you need to sleep well at night? And so he was in property investment. So he suggested when you mortgaged a property, you actually take a little bit more than you need, so that if rent dips or income dips or whatever, you've just got a little bit to draw on to be able to pivot and to be able to do things like that. And so have you got that ability maybe to have 10,000, 20,000 and not spend it all? And, you know, particularly in seasons like now where who knows what the global economy is going to do, but I'm suggesting it's probably not going to go uphill. And so, you know, have you got those reserves and that ability, or are you able to trim things down so that you can survive and do what you need to do? So cash flow is really important. At the end of the day, you got to eat, you got to pay the bills. All right. I think the last one here, and this will play back into our friend May King, who we'll probably be drawing on for decades to come, and that is making social media your friend. We used to talk a lot about in the startup space about public relations, about PR. Get PR, get your name in the local paper, get a speaking gig at a chamber of commerce, or, you know, somehow become what we used to call a strategy of preeminence in marketing. Become preeminent in your space so that people come to you for advice, and then obviously come to you for your service, your product or service. And so today, a lot of that PR happens on social media. Now, I would suggest a lot of bad PR happens on social media. If you're running a business, don't get involved in a political discussion, okay? Because there's on both sides of the political spectrum, there's just a bunch of haters, and then there's a majority of us who are like, you know, you might be left or right or whatever it might be, but generally towards the middle, and we can have a civil discourse without destroying each other. But social media, unfortunately, has become the space of replacing conversations with clicks and likes. And so you just need to be able to be aware of that. So have great conversations with your audience, get engagement as much as you can. If you're just getting likes, like I love today, we've got a lot of people saying hello back and things like that. Like Debbie, like Andrew, like Craig, you know, a lot of people saying hello back or doing something back. And so we know that they're engaged and they're not just here and gone. And so make sure you're getting that engagement. It's better to have 10 followers who are talking to you regularly than it is to have thousands of people who, you know, maybe like the occasional post or something like that, and you've paid to get that. So organic growth is really important, but it's that same sort of deal. Have good conversations, tell really good stories, create a space. So we talked about FOMO, fear of missing out. Create a space where people want to be in your presence and they feel like they'll miss out if they don't. Okay, so think about making social media your friend. Be careful there, and go watch the as I said, we refer back to the video with May King, because she talks a bit about some of the strategies, how many social channels you should be on, what kind of conversations, how do you connect, how do you create dialogue, all that sort of thing. Because it's not a monologue, even though social media for a lot of people is just a monologue. So think about that. How can you? Because at the end of the day, if you do this right, apart from your time, it's close to free, right? I mean, yes, you can pay for advertising and those sorts of things, but you know, if you do it well and you do it right, it can be close to free. And so that's kind of the modern day PR. I mean, PR is still available. You can still get articles published. You know, you can do podcasts and blogs and things like that, and get your story out. So just think about that. Think about how you can tell some great stories. Storytelling comes up in this again, and these can be things that you can do in terms of your own marketing and bootstrapping. There are, even if you're just looking at the first iteration, I wouldn't recommend this long term, but there are some really low cost, how do I build a website kind of stuff like Wix and WordPress and those sorts of things. And if you've got some skill there, or you can, again, shift that gig overseas, you can get fairly low cost logos. Maybe, one of the things we did in a Bootstrap business, we actually created a brand. We rallied around to get the brand properly to market, and then we rebranded with the money that we had from early sales. And so there's just different journeys you can look at in terms of how you go about going to market. So there are a lot of tips and tools there. If you have any of your own, I would love to hear them. I'd love you to put them up here so we can share them with the community. There's a lot of things you can be doing just to bootstrap your business, to keep it simple, and particularly in this season, where we're coming out of who knows whether we're coming. I'm in America, so who knows when we'll come out of this pandemic. But we will come out of it, and some countries already are, and there's I know there's a lot of lockdowns, and who knows what the spill-on effect is to the economy. So there's things you can be doing right now to trim down what you're doing. If you've gone out and spent too much money, rein it back in. Figure out how you can simplify. Move people to contracts rather than employment. Whatever it might be. There's different things you can do. Just look at your cost structures, think through them, and realize that, particularly in this season, but most seasons, you've got to be thinking about, how do I bootstrap? How do I keep it simple? How do I keep it cost effective? But what I don't want to do is I don't want to compromise on quality. I don't want to compromise on my customer experience and those sorts of things. So how do I do all of that in a way that helps me grow my business, get my idea out there, and maybe get me to that place where I could then secure a great investor? So we actually have those conversations a lot inside the Sandtrax Club. And so one of the things I'd love you to do is if you haven't already, if you haven't already, go and join Sandtrax. It is a closed community, so we're not open to the public, but anyone can join. It's just we don't broadcast it publicly. So go and join that. There's some great conversations going on in there. Linda runs that extremely well, and there you will find a whole bunch of resources. Even some of our mentors are watching the posts sometimes. That's free, but then there's also a paid community as well. Linda, maybe put that link up. There is a paid community as well where you can actually get access through messaging channels to over 25 global mentors who know where you're at, who have the wisdom to help you get to where you need to be, and are a fantastic resource. And we've been really enjoying some of the conversations that have been happening there with some of the paid members. So those conversations go a little bit deeper, and you may actually get some direct you will get some direct feedback from one or two of our mentors if you put questions up there, if you start enjoying that conversation. But it is a co-working space, so there are other businesses there, and they'll tell you their stories as well. So there's a couple of things you can be doing there. Obviously, we want to see some of your bootstrapping ideas. Go and join the Sandtrax community, and then also think about maybe even joining Sandtrax and coming along the journey with us, and seeing how you can connect with some of those people out there. And particularly as you're bootstrapping your business, it'll really help you in terms of growth and in terms of opportunities. And there are some investors in there as well. So thanks, Linda. Linda just put up sandtrax.co, .co, not .com. And so many people ask if it's a typo. It is not. So it's www.sandtrax.co. So we look forward to sharing that journey with you. Thanks very much for being here this morning. I'm just going to hang around for a little bit longer and see if there are any further questions. I'm on a bit of a delay, obviously, to what I'm saying and what you're seeing. And so, it's been a very exciting morning. But this is a really good opportunity for you to join, to co-work. We have these free and low-cost options in terms of you being able to be mentored as you're bootstrapping your business, as you're growing what you're doing. All right. Nino's back. Hey, Nino. Good to see you. And so if we don't have any more, I'm going to go back to my cup of coffee. It's about 9:30 in the morning here, and so I'm going to go back to my breakfast and my cup of coffee and get ready for my day. But we would love to hear what you've got to say. Thanks very much for joining today. Thanks for being part of the conversation. I'm Jono. As always. Enjoy the journey.